On August 4, 2020, in the quiet town of Rocky Mount, North Carolina, a young couple named Folarin Balogan and Yasmin Ryan celebrated the beginning of their new life together. They had just been married in a small, intimate ceremony, attended by close friends and family. The wedding was held at a countryside venue, just outside the town, surrounded by rolling hills and warm summer skies for many who knew them. Folarin and Yasmin seemed like the perfect match. They had dated for nearly 2 years, and from the outside, their relationship looked stable and loving. Folarin, 28 years old, worked as a construction manager. He was known as a calm, responsible man who rarely showed anger or frustration. People described him as quiet but kind-hearted. Yasmin, 27 years old, worked as a freelance graphic designer. She had moved to Asheville 4 years earlier and quickly built a successful career, working from home to those who met her. Yasmin was friendly, creative, and always full of life. They met through an online dating app in late 2016 and bonded over their shared love of travel, hiking, and art. Their relationship progressed quickly, and by the end of 2017, Folarin proposed. Yasmin said yes, without hesitation, and soon after, they began planning a future together. During their relationship, Folarin believed he knew everything about Yasmin. She shared stories about her childhood, her struggles moving to a new city, and her dreams for the future. However, there was one secret that Yasmin had never shared, something from her past that she thought was behind her forever. Yasmin was a transgender woman, assigned male at birth. She had transitioned fully in her early 20s, completing both her social and medical transition before moving to Asheville in her new life. She rarely spoke of her past, choosing instead to live privately and quietly for her. It was important to be seen simply as herself. Yasmin, when she met Folarin, she felt a connection stronger than any she had experienced before as their relationship grew more serious. Yasmin struggled internally with whether or not to tell him about her past. Each time she thought about revealing the truth, fear stopped her. She worried he might leave her, or worse, react with anger or violence. Eventually, she convinced herself it was better not to tell him at all. By the time they were engaged, Yasmin had buried the secret deep inside, promising herself that her love for Folarin and their future together were strong enough to leave the past behind after the wedding. Folarin surprised Yasmin with a honeymoon trip. They planned a one-week vacation to Blue Ridge Mountains, a place Yasmin had always wanted to visit. The couple checked into a cozy rental cabin on August 7th, looking forward to peaceful days in nature, away from the noise of the world. Neither of them knew that within just a few days, the beautiful M Mountain retreat would become the scene of a shocking and tragic crime, one that would leave a town in disbelief and a family searching for answers. It all began with love, but it would end in violence. The morning of August 8th, 2019, started like any normal day for Folarin and Yasmin. The sun rose gently over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky with soft orange and pink hues. Their cabin, located near a quiet trail, head outside the small town of Blowing Rock, was peaceful and private, exactly what they had wanted for their honeymoon. Yasmin woke up early and prepared breakfast. She made scrambled eggs and toast, while Folarin brewed fresh coffee. They ate together on the cabin's wooden deck, enjoying the crisp mountain air and the sound of birds in the distance. Yasmin seemed happy and relaxed, wearing a light sweater over her pajamas, while Folarin scrolled through his phone, checking messages from work, even though he promised himself he wouldn't. That day they had planned to hike one of the nearby trails, and later have dinner at a small restaurant in town. After breakfast, they packed their backpacks with snacks, water, and a camera. By 10 a.m. they were on the trail, walking hand in and laughing and stopping often to take photos of the scenery to anyone watching. They looked like a perfectly normal couple, deeply in love. They talked about their plans for the future, buying a house, having children, traveling to Europe. Yasmin's smile never left her face for the first time, and in a long time, she felt safe, like her past was finally far behind her. But Folarin had been acting differently since the wedding. Yasmin noticed he had moments of distance where he seemed deep in thought, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite understand. Sometimes he asked her unusual questions about her old friends, her teenage years, even about doctors she had seen before moving to Asheville. Yasmin brushed it off as normal post-wedding curiosity, but inside she felt a small growing fear that something was off that night. After dinner in town, they returned to the cabin. Rain began to fall softly outside, and Yasmin lit candles around the living room to make the space feel cozy. They opened a bottle of wine and sat by the fireplace, talking quietly. At some point during the evening, Folarin asked Yasmin directly, "Is there anything about you? I don't know anything important." Yasmin froze for a second. Her heart pounded, but she smiled and shook her head. "No, nothing," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Folarin nodded but didn't seem convinced. The rest of the night passed with polite conversation, but something between them had shifted. Yasmin could feel it for the first time. She wondered if maybe Folarin knew something, or worse, if someone had told him. The next day, August 9th. Folarin spent much of the morning on his phone, stepping outside to make private calls. When Yasmin asked who he was talking to, he simply said, "Work stuff," and changed the subject. Yasmin tried to ignore her growing sense of dread, reminding herself that this trip was meant to be a celebration of their new life together. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. The beautiful honeymoon Yasmin had dreamed of was slowly turning into something else, something darker. She just didn't know yet how dangerous it was about to become on the evening of August 10th, 2019. 3 days into their honeymoon, the peaceful silence of the Blue Ridge Mountains started to feel heavier. The weather had shifted. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, and steady rain began to fall inside the cabin. Yasmin and Folarin sat on opposite sides of the couch, the once warm and romantic mood between them now replaced by an uncomfortable quiet. Folarin had been acting strangely all day. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words felt cold and distant. He avoided eye contact. Yasmin asked if something was wrong, but he brushed her off with a short, "I'm fine," though it was clear that he wasn't the man she had married. Just a week earlier, seemed to be disappearing right in front of her. Later that night, as the rain tapped against the windows, Folarin excused himself and went into the bedroom. Yasmin stayed behind in the living room, staring into the fire, trying to calm her growing anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something Folarin wasn't telling her. After nearly an hour, she decided to check on him, but as she quietly approached the bedroom, she heard him speaking on the phone. His voice was low, serious. "She never told me," Folarin said. "Can you believe that?" How could someone hide something like that from their husband? Yasmin froze in place. Her heart sank. She realized in that instant that Folarin knew somehow he had found out the truth she had kept hidden, whether someone from her past had contacted him, or if he had uncovered documents or messages she thought were long gone. Yasmin wasn't sure, but the secret she had feared revealing was no longer a secret. She slowly backed away from the door and returned to the living room. Her mind was spinning. Fear, shame, and regret all mixed together as she tried to figure out what to do next. Should she confront him? Should she pack her bags and leave? But they were in the middle of the mountains, miles away, away from the nearest town. It was late. It was dark. She felt trapped. A few minutes later, Folarin reappeared, his face blank, his eyes unreadable. He sat down across from her and stared at her in silence. Finally, he asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Yasmin's hands trembled. She nodded slowly. There was no point in lying. Now I was going to tell you, but I was afraid, she whispered. I didn't think you'd understand. Folarin didn't respond. He simply got up and walked outside into the rain, leaving the door wide open behind him. Yasmin sat alone in the quiet cabin, realizing her worst nightmare had come true. The man she loved now looked at her like a stranger, and deep inside she started to feel that this story was no longer about a secret, it was about survival. On the morning of August 11th, 2020, local authorities received an unusual call from a nearby cabin rental owner in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. The owner, Mr. Harold Jenkins, reported that his guests, Folarin and Yasmin Balogan, had not checked out, as scheduled repeated phone calls to the cabin had gone unanswered, and their car was still parked outside, untouched, since the day before, worried that something might be wrong. Mr. Jenkins contacted the Watauga County Sheriff's Office by 10 a.m. 2 deputies were dispatched to the property to perform a welfare check. The rain from the previous night had left the area muddy and quiet. The air felt heavier than usual. When the officers arrived, they immediately noticed that the front door of the cabin was slightly open. One of the deputies called out, "Sheriff's office, is anyone inside?" But no answer came. Proceeding with caution, they entered the cabin. Inside, the scene was eerily calm. The living room was tidy, as if someone had just stepped out. 2 coffee mugs sat on the small table near the couch. A phone charger was plugged into the wall, and Yasmin's purse rested on the kitchen counter. But as they moved further into the cabin, they made a chilling discovery. In the bedroom, lying on the floor near the foot of the bed, was Yasmin's body. She had been strangled. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and no indication of a struggle. Everything else in the room appeared untouched, making the violence of the scene feel even more unsettling. Folarin was nowhere to be found. Detectives were immediately called to the scene, along with forensic teams to collect evidence. Photos were taken, fingerprints lifted, and the entire cabin was carefully searched for clues by 12:30 p.m. The case officially shifted from a welfare check to a homicide investigation. The initial assumption was clear. Folarin, Yasmin's husband of only 1 week, was missing, and his absence placed him as the primary person of interest. Investigators learned from Mr. Jenkins that Folarin and Yasmin had been staying there since August 7th, and according to rental staff, they appeared happy and normal in the first few days. However, things started to change when detectives interviewed a waitress from a local restaurant where the couple had dined on August 9th. She reported that Folarin seemed upset during dinner and had been asking strange personal questions to Yasmin in a tone that made her visibly uncomfortable. Police also retrieved Folarin's phone records. What they found confirmed their suspicions. Several long phone calls had been made from Folarin's phone on August 9th and 10th to an unknown number registered to someone from Asheville. Yasmin's previous city detectives quickly traced the number to a man named Gregory Hale, a former acquaintance of Yasmin from before her transition. when questioned. Later, Gregory admitted that Folarin had called him out of the blue, asking personal questions about Yasmin's past. Gregory, not knowing the full situation, had revealed that Yasmin was transgender, unaware of the possible danger this information could cause. With that, investigators believed they had identified the motive. Folarin had discovered Yasmin's past only days into their marriage. But now, the urgent task was finding Folarin. His car was still parked outside the cabin, and his wallet and phone had been left behind. It appeared he had left on foot, or someone had helped him disappear. What had started as a dream, Honeymoon, had become the site of a brutal crime, and the only person who could explain what happened was missing. By August 17, 2020, the search for Folarin Balogun had expanded. Beyond Blowing Rock police units, search dogs and even helicopters were deployed across the surrounding mountain areas. However, after nearly 24 hours, there was still no sign of Folarin. Investigators began to question whether he had managed to escape the area entirely, or if something else had happened to him. Then, at approximately 3:50 p.m., a breakthrough came, but not the one anyone expected. A hiker, Susan Miller, reported seeing a man matching Folarin's description the night of August 10th, near a remote section of the Tanwa Trail, about 4 miles from the couple's cabin. But what stood out most was that Folarin was not alone. According to Susan, he was speaking with another man near a parked black pickup truck. The second man was tall, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. I thought it was strange for that time of night, especially out there in the dark. Susan told authorities they looked like they were arguing. This was the first indication that Folarin might have had help leaving the scene, or perhaps someone was involved in Yasmin's death as well. Digging deeper, detectives checked nearby gas station security cameras along the highway, leading out of Blowing Rock. Footage from the early morning of August 11th showed the same black pickup truck traveling westbound, but the driver was alone, and it wasn't Folarin. The license plate led police to a man named Matthew Green, a local mechanic with a criminal history involving assault and illegal firearm possession. When police brought Matthew in for questioning, the investigation took a shocking turn. At first, Matthew denied knowing Folarin, but after only a few minutes of pressure, his story crumbled. Matthew admitted that Folarin had contacted him 2 days earlier through a mutual friend. Folarin, he claimed, was looking for a way out and seemed desperate, according to Matthew. Folarin offered him money in exchange for help disappearing after handling some personal business. But Matthew's next statement changed everything. "I never thought he'd actually kill her." Matthew confessed, "He just told me he found out something bad about his wife and needed to disappear afterward. I thought it was just a divorce or something. Not this." Matthew then revealed that after Yasmin's death, Folarin met him at the trail, had paid him $1,000 in cash, and asked to be driven to a remote bus station in Johnson City, Tennessee. About 90 miles away, investigators confirmed Matthew's route and found surveillance footage of Folarin boarding a bus. At 5:20 a.m. on August 12th, the bus was heading to Atlanta, Georgia. This discovery sent the case spiraling. What began as a local homicide was now an interstate manhunt. Folarin wasn't just missing, he was on the run. But the question remained: had Folarin truly planned the murder in advance with help? Or was this all the result of a spontaneous act of rage after learning Yasmin's secret? Either way, police now knew the clock was ticking. If Folarin made it out of Georgia, finding him would become much harder. The hunt was on, and Folarin Balogun was quickly becoming one of the most wanted men in the region. By August 12, 2018, the manhunt for Folarin Balogun was fully underway. News of Yasmin's death and Folleren's escape spread across the region, with his photo broadcast on local TV stations and shared online. Authorities in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas were all on alert. The FBI had officially joined the case, labeling Folleren as armed and dangerous. Detectives believed Folleren had a head start of nearly 48 hours. Tracking him was becoming more difficult with each passing moment. The bus that left Johnson City had arrived in Atlanta on the afternoon of August 11th, but Folleren had already left the station before police arrived. No clear sightings had been confirmed, since meanwhile, new details about the case were coming to light. Investigators uncovered messages from Folleren's phone, showing that days before the murder, he had been in contact with Gregory, Hale, the man from Asheville, who accidentally revealed Yasmin's past. According to Gregory, Folleren's tone during the calls was calm at first, but during their final conversation, Folleren became angry. He said, "Thanks for telling me the truth. I needed to know," Gregory told detectives. But there was something in his voice called, like he'd already made up his mind. Police also discovered a handwritten note left in Folleren's duffel bag at the cabin. The letter, scribbled on hotel stationery, read, "Marriage is built on trust. If you can't be honest with me, then what are we even doing? You lied. Now I have to fix it." This note confirmed to detectives that Folleren's actions were likely premeditated. The evidence pointed toward a man who felt betrayed and planned to punish Yasmin for keeping her past a secret as investigators worked around the clock to track him. The public grew restless. Social media filled with debates and outrage. Some people expressed sympathy for Yasmin, calling her death a brutal act of hatred. Others debated whether Folleren had been pushed over the edge. But for the detectives on the case, there was no question. Folleren Balogun had committed murder, and now he was fleeing. Justice pressure mounted on law enforcement to make an arrest before Folleren could disappear for good. Then, on August 14th, a tip came in from a motel clerk in Mon, Georgia. She reported that a man matching Folleren's description had checked in late the previous night, paying in cash and using a fake name. The motel was located just off the highway, an easy spot for someone who didn't plan on staying long. By the time officers arrived, the motel room was empty. Inside, they found signs that Folleren had been there: fast food wrappers, an empty duffel bag, and a receipt for a prepaid cell phone. Purchased earlier that day, the hunt intensified. Now Folleren had a burner phone cache, and another day's lead. Detectives feared the worst if Folleren reached Florida or moved farther south. South, he could vanish into larger cities, blending into the crowd, or slipping across the border, back at the sheriff's department in Watauga County. Lead investigator Detective Mark Phillips gathered his team. This isn't just about finding a fugitive anymore. Phillips said this is about stopping a man who has nothing left to lose with every hour. Folleren seemed to grow smarter, changing vehicles using cash, avoiding cameras. But law enforcement knew one thing for certain: people on the run always make mistakes, and Folleren's would come soon. On the morning of August 17th, 2020, nearly a week after Yasmin Balogun's murder, authorities finally caught a break at 7:30 a.m. A gas station clerk in Valdosta, Georgia, near the Florida border, reported a man acting nervously while buying supplies. The man paid in cash, kept his hoodie pulled low over his face, despite the heat, and left quickly in a dark sedan with no license plates. The clerk recognized the man from the news and immediately called 911. By 8 a.m., law enforcement from multiple agencies, including local police, state troopers, and FBI units, began setting up roadblocks along major highways leading into Florida. Helicopters were deployed, and officers spread out across nearby motels and rest stops At 9:50 a.m., just outside of Lake Park, Georgia, a patrol officer spotted the dark sedan, parked at the edge of a rest area. The engine was still running, but vehicle appeared empty. Approaching with caution, officers found Folarin Balogan sitting alone on bench nearby, staring out across highway. Thanks for watching True Crime Cases.